The transmission came through at 0347 hours, Terran Standard Time. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the TSS Retribution, watching the holographic display flicker with desperate faces. Human faces. Mothers clutching empty blankets. Fathers with hollow eyes. Children who would never see another sunrise. "Please," sobbed Maria Santos, a colonist from New Geneva. Her voice cracked through the static. "They took my daughter. She's only 6 years old. The Kythara, they just grabbed her and laughed. They said humans make good pets." The alien voice that followed was smooth, melodious, dripping with amusement. High Commander Veltar of the Kythara Dominion appeared on screen, his crystalline features shimmering with what could only be described as joy. Behind him, human children sat in cages, small hands pressed against the bars. "Admiral Chen," Veltar said, his translator converting his musical language into Cold English. "Your species has violated our territorial claims. These, offspring, are compensation. Consider it a lesson in knowing one's place in the galaxy." Sarah's knuckles went white against the steel railing. "Release them. Now." Veltar's laugh was like breaking glass. "Or what? You'll file a complaint with the Galactic Mediation Council. Send angry transmissions." He gestured to the caged children behind him. "Look at them, Admiral. Look how quiet they've become. We may keep a few as curiosities. The rest." He shrugged with elegant indifference. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Not the comfortable quiet of a well-functioning ship, but the terrible silence that comes before a storm. Sarah stared at the blank screen where moments before she had seen Earth's children trapped like animals. "Ma'am." Lieutenant Commander Jackson's voice was carefully controlled. "Orders." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She thought of her own daughter, Emma, safe on Earth, playing in their garden, laughing at something her father had said. She thought of the parents who would never hear their children laugh again. "How long to reach Kythera Prime?" she asked. 3 hours, 14 minutes at maximum burn, came the reply from navigation. "And our weapon status?" "Full arsenal, ma'am. All systems operational." Sarah turned from the screen, her eyes hard as winter steel. "Signal the fleet. We're going to Kythera Prime." "Ma'am, the Kythera have a massive defense network. Their homeworld is protected by, I don't care if it's protected by the gods themselves." Sarah's voice cut through the air like a blade. "They took our children. They laughed about it. They called them pets." She looked around the command center, meeting each officer's eyes. "Today, they learn what happens when you threaten Earth's young." The TSS Retribution was humanity's newest dreadnought, built after the Proxima incident when humanity realized the galaxy was not as peaceful as the welcome committees had claimed. Its hull bristled with rail guns, plasma torpedoes, and something the Kythera had never seen before, quantum destabilizers, weapons that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. As the fleet moved through hyperspace, Sarah walked the corridors. She saw the faces of her crew, saw their anger, their determination. These weren't career soldiers seeking glory. These were parents, siblings, friends of the missing children. Ordinary humans who had been pushed too far. In the armory, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez was loading torpedo warheads with mechanical precision. His movements were too careful, too controlled. Sarah had seen that look before. It was the look of someone holding back an ocean of rage. "Chief," she said softly. "Ma'am." He didn't look up from his work. "Your nephew was among the taken." Rodriguez's hands stilled for just a moment. "Miguel. 7 years old. Wanted to be a pilot when he grew up." His voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tremor in his shoulders. "They showed him on the transmission, ma'am. In one of those cages. He was crying for his mama." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're going to bring them home," Chief. Rodriguez finally looked up, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her take a step back. It wasn't hope. It wasn't determination. It was something colder, something final. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We are." The bridge was quiet as they dropped out of hyperspace. Kythara Prime hung before them like a jewel, its surface covered in crystalline cities that caught and refracted the light of its twin suns. Beautiful. Serene. Untouched by war for 1,000 years. Incoming transmission, Admiral, communications reported. Veltar appeared on screen again, but his amusement had been replaced by confusion, then growing alarm as he saw the human fleet emerging from hyperspace. Dozens of ships, all bristling with weapons, all pointing toward his perfect world. "Admiral Chen, what is the meaning of this? This is an act of aggression against a sovereign system. The Galactic Council will, the Galactic Council," Sarah interrupted, "can file a complaint." She stood, her uniform crisp, her bearing military perfect. But her eyes were the eyes of a mother whose children had been threatened. "You have exactly 60 seconds to release every human child in your custody and transmit their coordinates." Veltar's crystalline features flickered with what might have been fear. "You cannot be serious. This is madness. Over a few primitive offspring? We can negotiate, perhaps exchange them for 50 seconds. Admiral, be reasonable. These creatures are nothing. Barely sentient. We can breed more if you require, 30 seconds. The alien's composure cracked entirely. "You would risk galactic war over livestock? Over pets?" Sarah's voice became very, very quiet. 10 seconds. This is insane. You cannot, time's up. Sarah nodded to her weapons officer. "Fire." The first salvo lit up the darkness of space like a new star being born. Quantum destabilizers struck Kythara Prime's orbital defense platforms, unraveling their molecular structure in cascades of impossible light. The elegant crystal satellites that had protected the homeworld for millennia simply ceased. Veltar's image flickered as his command center shook. "Wait. Stop. We can, you had your chance," Sarah said. "You chose to laugh instead." She turned to her tactical officer. "Target their military installations. No civilian areas. We're not them." The bombardment was surgical and devastating. Humanity had learned much about precision warfare, about the difference between justice and genocide. Military bases vanished in controlled explosions. Defense networks collapsed like houses of cards. The Kythara's proud fleet, caught in dock, became expanding clouds of superheated gas. But Sarah wasn't finished. "Open a channel to all Kythara frequencies," she ordered. Her image appeared on screens across the planet, in every crystal spire, every elegant tower. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of Earth itself. "People of Kythara Prime. Your leaders took our children. They caged them like animals. They laughed when we begged for their return." Sarah's face was stone, but her words carried the fury of every human parent who had ever lost a child. "We have destroyed your military capability. Your orbital defenses are gone. Your fleet is space dust. But you still live because we are not you." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Return our children within the hour, and this ends here. Refuse, and we will turn your beautiful world into a monument to the price of harming human young. We will make sure every species in the galaxy knows what happens when you threaten our families." The transmission ended. 43 minutes later, small transport ships began launching from Kythara Prime. On the bridge of the Retribution, Sarah watched the scanner display as the transports approached. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Incoming transmission from Transport 1, communications announced." The screen flickered to life, and Sarah's breath caught. There, pale and frightened but alive, sat little Miguel Rodriguez. Behind him, dozens of other children, human children, all looking scared but unharmed. "Mama?" Miguel's small voice carried across space. "Are you there? I want to come home." Sarah had to close her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. "We're here, sweetheart. You're all coming home." The rescue operation took 2 hours. Every child accounted for. Every family reunited, at least through long-distance communications. Sarah stood on the observation deck, watching the transports dock with the hospital ship, watching medical teams rush to check on the children, watching parents weep with relief through video links. Chief Rodriguez stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as he watched his nephew being examined by the medical team. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet, Chief." Sarah's voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made him look at her. This isn't over. She was right. The next morning, the Galactic Mediation Council demanded that Admiral Chen present herself for trial on charges of unprovoked aggression. The Kythara Dominion, despite their military losses, filed formal complaints. 17 other species signed a petition condemning humanity's disproportionate response. Sarah stood before the council in her dress uniform, facing beings from across the galaxy. Some were humanoid, others were barely recognizable as sentient life. All of them looked at her with varying degrees of disgust, fear, or condescension. Admiral Chen, intoned Counselor Drac, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree. "You stand accused of destroying military assets of a sovereign world, disrupting galactic peace, and setting a dangerous precedent for vigilante justice. How do you plead?" Sarah looked around the chamber. She saw the Kythara delegation, Veltar among them, his crystalline features still beautiful but somehow dimmed. She saw representatives from dozens of species, all waiting for her to apologize, to grovel, to accept that humans should know their place. "I plead," Sarah said clearly, "that every being in this chamber should remember this day. Remember what happened when a species thought they could take human children and face no consequences." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Counselor Drac's many eyes narrowed. "That is not a recognized plea, Admiral." "Then let me be clear," Sarah continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Humanity will follow galactic law. We will respect sovereign borders. We will engage in peaceful trade and diplomacy." She paused, looking directly at Veltar. "But if any species, anywhere, at any time, threatens our children, we will respond with the full force of human fury. And after what happened at Kythara Prime, I believe the galaxy understands what that means." The chamber erupted. Some species demanded harsh punishment. Others called for humanity to be expelled from galactic society entirely. But Sarah noticed something else. She noticed the fear in their eyes. The way some of the smaller species looked at her with something that might have been respect. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, humanity was censured, fined, and required to pay reparations to the Kythara Dominion. Sarah accepted the punishment without complaint. After all, humanity had gotten what it came for. But the real impact of those 3 hours above Kythara Prime rippled across the galaxy in ways no one had expected. 6 months later, Sarah received a coded transmission from the Vril Collective, a peaceful species of traders who had suffered under Kythara protection rackets for decades. "Admiral Chen," the message began, "we wanted you to know. The Kythara no longer demand tribute from our worlds. They claim it's due to budget constraints following their military losses, but we know the truth. They're afraid. For the first time in our recorded history, they're afraid." Similar messages came from dozens of other species. The galaxy's bullies, it seemed, had suddenly discovered restraint. The strong had always preyed on the weak, secure in the knowledge that no one would retaliate with meaningful force. Humanity had changed that equation. But there were darker consequences too. 3 systems closed their borders to human ships. The hegemony of Zek declared humanity a rogue species, and began building defensive installations along their territory. Fear was a two-edged sword. Sarah didn't lose sleep over it. She had seen the recordings from Kythara Prime, watched the children being loaded into those transports like cargo. Some things were worth any price. A year after the incident, she received an unexpected visitor. Veltar himself appeared on her flagship, alone, under a flag of diplomatic immunity. He looked different somehow, less arrogant, more thoughtful. "Admiral," he said, his translator converting his musical speech into careful English. "I come to speak with you privately." They met in Sarah's ready room, just the two of them. Veltar moved with his species' characteristic grace, but Sarah could sense something different in his posture. "You destroyed everything," he said without preamble. "Our fleet, our defenses, our reputation. The Dominion is a shadow of what it was." "You took our children," Sarah replied simply. "Yes." Veltar was quiet for a long moment. "I have been thinking about that day. About your response. In our culture, Admiral, strength is demonstrated through the subjugation of the weak. It is how we have always measured ourselves. And now? Now, I understand that there are different kinds of strength." Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been sadness. The strength to protect rather than to dominate. The strength to risk everything for those who cannot protect themselves. He looked directly at her. It is a strength we had forgotten existed. Sarah studied the alien commander. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because there are others in the galaxy who still do not understand. Who see humanity's response as weakness disguised as strength. They believe that if they are clever enough, subtle enough, they can still prey upon human settlements without consequence." Veltar's voice carried a warning. "They are wrong, but they do not yet know it." 3 days after Veltar's visit, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet moving through the outer rim. The hegemony of Zek, true to their declaration, was moving toward New Geneva, the same colony where the children had been taken. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical display. The hegemony fleet was 3 times the size of her force, composed of massive battleships that dwarfed even humanity's dreadnoughts. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Jackson said quietly, "they're demanding the evacuation of all human colonies in the sector. They claim we're too dangerous to be allowed near their territory." Sarah almost smiled. "Almost. Signal the fleet," she said. "All ships, battle stations." "Ma'am, we're outnumbered 3-1. Numbers don't win wars, Jackson." Sarah's eyes never left the display. "Will does." The Battle of New Geneva lasted 14 hours. The hegemony's massive ships were powerful, but they were also slow, designed for overwhelming force rather than tactical flexibility. Humanity's smaller, faster vessels darted between them like wolves among cattle, quantum destabilizers tearing through armor that had never been designed to withstand such focused destruction. But it was what happened after the battle that truly shocked the galaxy. Instead of destroying the hegemony fleet entirely, Sarah offered them quarter. The surviving ships were allowed to withdraw, their crews intact, their hulls damaged but reparable. As they limped away from the battlefield, she sent them a message. "This could have been avoided," she said, her image broadcast to every surviving hegemony ship. "Humanity doesn't seek conquest. We don't want your worlds or your resources. We want only to live in peace, to raise our children, to build our future." Her voice hardened. "But if you threaten our people, if you try to drive us from our homes, if you forget the lesson of Kythara Prime, then we will remind you. As many times as necessary." The message spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by trade ships and diplomatic pouches to every inhabited system. The hegemony of Zek, one of the galaxy's most aggressive powers, had been defeated by a smaller human fleet and then shown mercy. It changed everything. Within a month, 17 species requested formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Trade agreements multiplied. The Vrilm Collective proposed a mutual defense pact. Even some of the more aggressive species began to reconsider their expansion policies. But perhaps the most significant change was among humanity itself. Sarah received reports from colonies across human space. Children who had been afraid to play outside were running through fields again. Parents who had watched the skies with fear were looking up at the stars with hope. Humanity had learned something about itself in those 3 hours above Kythara Prime, something that would reshape their place in the galaxy. They had learned that sometimes, the only way to ensure peace was to be willing to fight for it. 1 year after the Battle of New Geneva, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the newly constructed memorial wall on Earth. Thousands of names were carved into the black stone, representing every human who had died in the conflicts that followed first contact. At the top, in letters of gold, was a simple inscription: "They took our children. We brought them home." Below that, in smaller text, were the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto among the stars: "We do not seek war, but we will not flee from it. We do not desire conquest, but we will not accept subjugation. We are human, and we protect our own." Sarah placed her hand on the wall, feeling the weight of all those names, all those lives. Behind her, she could hear the laughter of children playing in the memorial garden, safe under the protection their sacrifice had bought. In the distance, a transport was taking off for the stars, carrying human families to new worlds, new hopes, new futures. They flew without fear now, knowing that if anyone threatened them, if anyone dared to cage their children like animals, the response would be swift and terrible. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity not for their technology or their numbers, but for their absolute, uncompromising dedication to protecting their young. It was a lesson written in the ashes of Kythara Prime's military installations, signed in the wreckage of the hegemony fleet, and sealed with the tears of parents reunited with their children. Some lessons, Sarah reflected, were worth teaching no matter the cost. As she walked away from the memorial, her personal communicator chimed. A message from the frontier, from Captain Martinez of the exploration vessel New Horizon. "Admiral, we've made contact with a new species in the Andromeda approach. They seem friendly, but they've been asking a lot of questions about human children. About our families. I thought you should know." Sarah stopped walking. In the garden behind her, the laughter of children continued, innocent and joyful. Above, the stars waited, vast and full of unknowns. She opened her communicator and began typing a response. "Captain Martinez, remind our new friends about Kythara Prime. If they have questions about human families, they can ask nicely, from a respectful distance, while keeping their hands where we can see them." She paused, thinking of Miguel Rodriguez, now 8 years old and still wanting to be a pilot. Of all the children playing behind her, safe and protected. Of the children yet to be born who would inherit the galaxy humanity was building for them. And Martinez? If they don't seem to understand the lesson, feel free to give them a more detailed explanation. The message sent, Sarah continued her walk home. The stars above held promise and threat in equal measure, but humanity was ready for both. They had learned the most important lesson of all: in a galaxy full of predators, sometimes the best defense was making sure everyone knew you had teeth. And humanity's teeth, as the Kythara and the hegemony could attest, were very, very sharp indeed.